After more than 2 years of fighting, the Roman troops succeeded in getting the upper hand and have managed to imprison the rebels in the far south of Italy. However, the fighting is not over yet, and Spartacus is trying to cross over to Sicily to incite a revolt on the island, given that the last two servile wars had taken place there. Would their cry for freedom be heard by the gods and grant them a decisive victory over the Roman legions? Stay tuned, as the Battle of the Silarius River is about to take place. Totiding hostis isiquot servus. As many enemies as you have slaves. The Romans never imagined that such a large slave insurrection could occur, let alone one that would be so devastating to the Republic. However, in the last year, the Roman praetor who has been put in charge of the troops, Marcus Crassus, has managed to defeat Spartacus's forces on several occasions, pushing them further and further south towards Rhegium. The Roman commander wants to put an end to the rebellion as soon as possible, but his troops have suffered heavy casualties and are exhausted after such a long march. While on retreat, Spartacus has made an agreement with a group of Cilician pirates to transport him and 2,000 of his men to Sicily through the Strait of Messina. His idea is to get reinforcements to save the rest of his comrades and possibly move permanently to the island. To prevent the rebels from escaping northward, Crassus has decided to build a large fortification of walls and ditches, which is about 60 kilometers long, some 37 miles. The idea of starving them to death was a good one. After all, such a large army would run out of resources sooner than later. Several groups of slaves have decided to divide their forces and attack different sectors to prevent the fortification from being completed. And meanwhile, most of the force is waiting for the arrival of the fleet to save them. Others have begun to build rafts and boats to cross as soon as possible. In the minds of all the rebels is the reality that if they do not find a solution, they will soon run out of food reserves. Meanwhile, in Rome, the situation has improved considerably for the Republic. Pompey Magnus has managed to pacify Hispania after several years of military campaigns and is currently marching towards Rome. But the Senate has ordered him not to stop in the capital, but to continue south to help put an end to the slave revolt. At the same time, the Senate has requested reinforcements from Macedonia, which would come under the command of Marcus Lucullus and would land in Brundisium. Certainly, the Romans wanted to put an end to the revolt, and they were not really happy with how long Crassus was taking to crush the insurrection. But this news is not well received by the Roman praetor, since if that happens, then the credit for the victory over Spartacus will go to the general who brings the reinforcements, and as a result, his military efforts during the last year would be useless. Clearly, more than putting an end to the rebellion, Crassus wishes to obtain a triumph in battle to serve as propaganda to gain political prestige and run for consul the following year. For his part, Spartacus has realized that the pirates have deceived him, and even though he paid them, no fleet will come to their rescue. And worse, after receiving news that Pompey is returning with his legions from Hispania, he knows without a doubt that his days are numbered if he stays still in Rhegium. Some of the rebels had made small boats and rafts to cross the Straits of Messina, but all attempts failed. Crassus has taken measures to ensure that no rebels can cross into Sicily. Surely Roman troops have been stationed on the other side on the island, and possibly he has ordered the fleet to patrol the surrounding areas to prevent any rescue. It is not known exactly if this is the reason why the pirates did not return. Some sources say that what they actually did was to abandon Spartacus after receiving payment, and that they never intended to come to rescue him and his followers. For this reason, he decides to send emissaries to negotiate with Crassus and resolve the conflict peacefully. But the praetor flatly rejects any end of the negotiation. He is not in the least interested in reaching an agreement, as this would undoubtedly be seen as an act of weakness. The rebels have destroyed many settlements throughout Italy and have even humiliated Roman troops on more than one occasion, so the population will only accept the blood of the insurgents as a resolution to the conflict. There was a strong tendency among the Romans to consider themselves superior because of their culture and religion. In this case, enemies were seen as weak, and when defeat occurred, the commander was blamed. Negotiating with Spartacus would mean treating him as an equal. Rome needed to send a message, and it was clear. Insurrection was to be punished with total annihilation. This would serve to prevent other areas of the Republic from even thinking of rising up in rebellion. After failing in the negotiations, and with few options, Spartacus decides to act and orders all his men to attack the fortifications by surprise and cross as soon as possible toward the north of Bruttium. Before starting the march, he orders his horse to be brought and sacrifices it, saying that if they win the battle against Crassus, he will have many steeds to choose from, and if he loses, he will no longer need it either. Clearly, his attitude at this point was to go all or nothing. The assault against the defenses is successful, and most of the rebels manage to advance without suffering heavy casualties. However, Crassus's troops are pursuing them, and they manage to catch up with two large groups of slaves which are led by Gannicus and Castus. The two factions engaged in heavy fighting, but as expected, the Romans managed to defeat them, killing about half of the members of the rebel forces. According to Appian, a total of 12,300 slaves fell in this initial clash, but defeating them was not easy for the legions. A cavalry officer named Lucius Quinctius fell in the fight along with several of his men. On the other hand, Spartacus continued to advance, but he no longer had the ability to control his followers. His forces were not composed of a professional army, and the indiscipline after the defeat suffered was increasing. Several groups began to split up in order to attack Crassus independently. They no longer wanted to flee. The gladiator leader, realizing the situation, decided to turn around and face the legions head-on in what is known as the Battle of the Salarius River. Spartacus' force at this point is estimated to be at around 50,000, but as has always been the case throughout the series, we must remember that most of its combatants were not professional soldiers. Nonetheless, after more than 2 years, in the several encounters they had with the consular forces, they had certainly developed some military skills. On top of that, they knew that if they were to be captured, the consequences would be terrifying, ranging from torture to crucifixion. No doubt this was the battle of their lives. The insurgents charged in a disorganized mob, as there were many who were already engaging the enemy, and crashed into the shields of the Roman formations. Initially, several enemy soldiers fell in battle. Despite having some numerical advantage, large groups of slaves began to fall dead in the face of the discipline and determination of the Roman soldiers. At one point during the confrontation, Spartacus was able to spot Crassus and saw it as his opportunity to obtain victory. He encouraged his people to fight with all their strength and gathered a group of men with whom he advanced directly against the Roman praetor in order to kill him and put an end to the battle. His attack was successful. He managed to kill 2 centurions as he advanced, but unfortunately he was wounded by a javelin in the leg and fell to the ground. This reportedly forced him to his knees, but he continued to fight and refused to surrender. Eventually, the Romans managed to catch up with him and killed him. The rebels fought with all they had, but ended up being completely defeated, suffering heavy casualties. A large portion of the slave army was killed, with some sources saying that more than 30,000 rebels had died, but modern historians have suggested the losses to be at around 10,000. Appian pointed that about 1,000 Roman soldiers fell in battle, but others dispute this figure, claiming that the number was much higher. The rest of the survivors tried to retreat, but Crassus ordered an advance against them and managed to capture about 6,000 as prisoners who were crucified along the main road linking Rome to Capua. Another part of those who managed to escape, about 5,000, were captured by the troops of Pompey Magnus, possibly in northern Italy, and were executed. The body of Spartacus was never recovered. So many corpses were scattered on the battlefield that it was impossible to find him. Finally, the war was over, and with it the dream of the rebels had died. However, the impact was such that Roman citizens began to rely less on slave labor and to hire employees from the surrounding areas to work on the large rural estates. Although Crassus achieved total victory over Spartacus, it is not his name that went down in history. There is no doubt that the gladiator has been referenced throughout time as a symbol of the struggle against tyranny, and for freedom and justice. He was a very charismatic man who inspired thousands of others to follow him, and his death, beyond killing him, served to immortalize him as a warrior who preferred to die fighting rather than surrender or abandon his comrades. We hope you liked our series and that you leave us a like and subscribe to the channel. Additionally, we would like you to leave a comment to confirm that you have come to the fight and that we count on your presence in our ranks. We thank all of you who accompany us day by day. It is thanks to you that we are still here, and we hope to continue marching triumphantly as we travel through time and see the great battles that have taken place over the centuries. Thank you very much, and see you soon.